October was not the best overall reading month in general, but we'll wrap it up anyway. Hi everyone, my name's Chloe, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here today. Today's video is my reading wrap up for the month of October. As I've stated, it was not the best month. I ended up getting that sort of super cold that was going around and was kind of knocked out for about a week. It started like in my sinuses and then I ended up with tonsillitis and then I had a chest infection and I ended up having a week off work. Thought I'd be able to at least get some reading done, but then just could not stay awake. So yes, very little reading done. I managed to complete my TBR from TBR MASH and then did one extra book, but there were like 4 other books that I planned on also reading during the month that I just did not get to. So there's not going to be too much to talk about. I will actually just give you the statistics for the month as always, so we can see where I was at. But yes, it was definitely a slower reading month than I hoped it would be, but it did definitely pick up towards the end as well, and I will get to that in a minute. So I read 7 books during the month of October. That puts it at my month with the lowest amount of books read. Well, actually it's tied with July. In July I was in a reading slump, so it's definitely not a great month. In terms of pages, I was a little bit higher than July, so I read 3,196 pages, which averaged out at 103 per day, which is great because, as I've said multiple times before, I am trying to read at least a minimum of 100 pages per day, and July is the only month that I actually fell under that. Luckily for this, although I only read 7 books, I did read a couple of chunky ones, so I was able to sort of just push myself over that. And now for the year I am at 128 pages per day, so still doing very well. I'm actually for the year on 99 books read total, so I'm about to go over 100 and I'm very happy about that because my sort of Goodreads goal was 52, but one of my stretch goals was 100, and then my other stretch goal is to beat last year, which I can't remember if it was 105 or 115, but either way I'm very much on track to beat it, and yeah, it just makes me happy. For the format of books I read this month, I read 3 physical books and then 4 of them were a mixture of audio and physical. I think that helped because when I was starting to feel a little bit better, I could listen to the audio when I maybe couldn't concentrate as much on just reading physically. And also, like I said, I read a couple of chunky books and listening to the audio helped me power through those ones as well. For age range, I have been generally moving more towards adult, but this month it was more of a split. It was 3 YA and 4 adult. Again, I think part of that was, well actually no, part of it was just because that was what my TBR dictated this month, but also I think that did happen to help because having some YA in there definitely helped when I was not feeling the best and able to read as much as normal. And then the last statistic is the sort of star ratings. So I have got 2 3 stars, 3 4 stars and 2 5 stars. So again, not my best reading month. In September I had a lot of 5 stars. This time, I mean, I still had 2, which is great, but it was not quite as strong as September was. Especially when I get to the 3-star rated books, they were a little bit harder to push through, and I will explain why in a minute. But yeah, it was sort of like an average reading month, just with less read because of things out of my control. So without further ado, let's talk about what it was that I actually read during the month of October. So the first book that I read was probably my most anticipated read of the month. It is a sequel / new series in the same world as one of my favourite book series, and that is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. So I pre-ordered this one a while ago, but it's been one of my most anticipated books of the year, and luckily it did not disappoint. This one ended up being my first 5-star read of the month. So without going too much into spoilers, because there is a character in this that is from the Caraval series, and I don't really even want to say who it is necessarily because I suppose that is a spoiler in a way as to what happens in Caraval. But basically it's about a new character called Evangeline Fox. I'm just going to read you a little bit of the synopsis because they describe it better than I do. But it says, For as long as she can remember, Evangeline Fox has believed in happily ever after, until she learns that the love of her life is about to marry another and her dreams are shattered. And then without, this is where it starts to tell you who is actually in it. But basically she strikes up a deal with somebody in order to stop the wedding, and then things kind of go from there because there is a bargain involved, and in order to fulfill her part of it, she has to promise that she will give away free kisses, but they are not of her choosing. And yeah, things kind of spiral from there. I really enjoyed this. It is the start of a new series, so it definitely ended in a place where I am very desperate to know what happens next. Stephanie Garber's writing is really beautiful. It's got a slight lyrical feeling to it. Not quite as lyrical as, like, say, reading last month I read Night Circus, or maybe reading like a Laini Taylor book. They're quite lyrical and beautiful. It's not quite that level, but it's definitely got that sort of imagery in there, which I really enjoy. I find her writing really easy just to escape into. I'm not sure if I feel like I still prefer the Caraval series, but maybe that is just because I'm very attached to those characters. I will say though that the new character in this, Evangeline, I really did enjoy her perspective. So yeah, I'm very excited to pick up the sequel whenever that comes out, and very glad that this one did not disappoint, because like I said, one of my most anticipated reads of the year, so would have been not a great start to the month if I wouldn't have liked this one. And then we go from one of my highest rated books of the month to one of my lower rated ones, and that is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is definitely a me issue, not a book issue. I will say that before I start. I gave this one 3 stars. It is in that sort of gothic horror type genre, but that is not something I read a lot of. I don't tend to read a lot of horror. I'm not a horror person in general. I don't really watch horror films or anything like that. And I don't know, I can't even really give you thoughts because I actually forgot a lot about it with this, but I felt like I was kind of constantly waiting for something to happen, but then what actually happened didn't really sort of have the effect I feel like it was supposed to have. Yeah, it felt like there was a lot of like tension, but not a lot of payoff in it for me personally. I feel like I expected there to be more, but from what I've heard of other people who read this, they really enjoyed it. So I feel like it is a me issue because, like I said, not my usual type of book. I feel like I don't read a lot of horror, and that is by choice. It's not something that I particularly enjoy. I feel like I can't really get sort of the atmosphere you're supposed to get. I just don't connect with it properly. So it is very much a me issue. I keep saying this, but yeah, 3 stars, just a little bit, I don't know. I ended up buying the audiobook for this as well because I thought that might help, having it sort of read out to me. That might add those vibes to it for me, but it just didn't. I can see why it would for other people, but just did not connect with me at all. So yeah, 3 stars. It was okay. I'm not saying it's a bad book, but it's not something that I'm ever going to reread again. That being said, actually, I do believe that with this author, she tends to write across quite a few different genres, and I don't think the rest of her books are horror. So I may pick up another book by this author in the future because there were things I liked about the writing style, just maybe not in this genre. So a promising experience in a way, because I do probably want to pick up another book from this author at some point. Just maybe this one wasn't the right one for me. And we're back up to the good ratings. This is my other 5-star read of the month, and I don't think I need to talk too much about why this is a 5-star because it is the 3rd book in a series. I've read the other 2 in the previous 2 months, so if you've watched either of those wrap-ups, you know my love of this series, and that is the Farseer trilogy, the Realm of the Elderlings, whatever you want to call it. This is Assassin's Quest, so it is the last book in the first trilogy in the Realm of the Elderlings series, which is a 16-book series in total. There's a lot to this, but yes, this basically follows the character of Fitz, who is the bastard son of the Crown Prince, and he is being raised by his mother until his maternal grandfather says enough is enough, your father can pay for you for a while. He is then left on his father's doorstep, and his father quickly abdicates the throne, and he is kind of left to be raised by his stable master until the king takes an interest and ends up training him to become an assassin, because he's close enough to the nobility to be able to sort of get in with them, but also far enough away that he can kind of be a little bit more nefarious. Can you tell that I've said that summary a few times before? That's a summary of the first book. We are very, very far on from here now. This is probably, I don't know how many years after the first book it's set, but it's been a while. Like, Fitz was a child when he first got to Bookkeep, and then by the end of this one he is, I think, late teens, so probably like it's spanning like probably around 8-10 years maybe. But if I went into what this one is actually about, it would be major spoilers for what happened in the previous ones. I will say I gave this one 5 stars, but when I was reading it at the beginning of the reading experience, I was not necessarily sure it was going to be a 5 stars because it is a little bit slower at first. It's known as a book that has a lot of walking in it, and that is very, very true. It is a lot of Fitz just sort of walking from one place to another and just meeting lots of different people on the way. What I did like though is the character work in this. I am more of a character reader than a plot reader, so although there wasn't a lot happening, I did enjoy all of these sort of smaller character moments that were happening in there. And then by the time it got to the end of it and how it wrapped up, I did very much enjoy it. So as a whole, I tend to rate more on enjoyment than on like specific details. So while I know that like there were definitely flaws with this, for me this is still a 5-star read because I really enjoyed the experience of sort of wrapping up this particular trilogy. So yes, I very much enjoyed it. Probably not my favourite in the first trilogy. I don't know, maybe the second one, because I just really, that's when I sort of was like, yes, I really, really love this series. But I am now going to be moving on to the next trilogy in the series. I've actually already started. I've been listening to the audiobook this morning. So I'm moving on to the Live Ship Traders. And yeah, I'm really happy that I have finished my first sort of trilogy in the Hob world and will be carrying on with it. Now on to a 4-star read that is actually a disappointing thing in a way, because I really wanted this to be 5 stars. I really thought it would be, but it just wasn't quite there, and that was The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune. So like I said, 4 stars. I did very much enjoy this one. There's just one particular thing that I found a little bit grating that brought it down. But before I get into that, let me just give you a quick summary. This is basically set in a world where there are these people called Extraordinaries. So essentially people who develop powers. They are kind of like superheroes or supervillains depending on, I suppose, what they're doing at the time. And the main character was a little bit obsessed with these. He writes fan fiction. There is little excerpts of the fan fiction all the way through, and it's just about what happens when he sort of ends up caught up in their world a little bit. And I, like I said, did really enjoy it. It was a very high 4 stars. It's just that the main character was just a little bit too self-centered at times, that there were a lot of things that, like, all the twists and things in this were very obvious from the beginning, and I think it was supposed to be that way. I think it was that you were supposed to realise these things and to be like, seriously, why is the main character not noticing this? But it did just get to the point where I was like, okay, I just really want him to like pay attention to his friends and just not be quite so much all about himself. Because whilst it wasn't written in first person, it was very much written from Nick, the main character's point of view. So it just it got a little bit irritating after a while of sort of how much he didn't pay attention to other people and who were supposed to be his friends. This being said, it sounds like I didn't enjoy this book. I definitely did enjoy it. I actually enjoyed it so much that after reading the first 50 pages, I ordered the sequel. And I do think the sequel could be better in terms of the things that irritated me about the main character, because I feel like there was growth that happened throughout this, and there is potential for more growth by the time it gets to the second one. So I think the second one could potentially be a 5-star, but this was a very high, like 4.5, just not quite a 5-star. Okay, so all the ones that I've shown you so far, I kind of read throughout the month. I think the first 3 I read like right at the beginning of the month. The Extraordinaries took me a while because that was when I was ill, and then I started reading the next ones. Well, actually one of them I was kind of reading throughout the month on audiobook on and off, but these next 3 I ended up finishing them all on the same day, because basically on the last day I just binge read a lot. I read like 500 pages on the last day of the month just to make sure I finished my TBR, and I also squeezed an extra book in there. So I think I have coherent thoughts for all of these, but they may mingle into one a little bit. But we'll start off with the first one that I finished on Halloween, and that is A Danger to Herself and Others by Alyssa Scheinmel. So this one is one that I just picked up on a whim. It was in a buy one get one half price offer in Waterstones. It's actually on my These Books Will Self-Destruct TBR, so I needed to read it within the next 12 months, otherwise I will have to unhaul it. And I decided it was a good one to pick up during this month because it is a sort of mystery thriller type book, so I thought it would work well for spooky season when I'm not a massive spooky season reader. And unfortunately this is the other 3-star book of the month, so as you can see, the 2 sort of spooky season type books that I read were the 2 least favourites of the month, which kind of shows you why I don't generally read those types of books. So this one is about a girl who ends up getting institutionalized. She is undergoing an assessment because she's under suspicion about being involved in an accident that happened with her roommate at this summer school that she was at. And then basically at the treatment facility that she is at, she ends up with a roommate, and she decides that she is going to go out of her way in order to befriend this roommate, to kind of show the people that are assessing her that she can sort of play well with others, because she has been deemed a danger to herself and others. And it's hard to give thoughts on this one without giving spoilers, but I'm going to try and be as vague as possible and basically say that the reason why I didn't love this is that I think the story idea was there. There's a couple of reasons why I didn't love this. One, I'm just going to say that there is an author's note at the end of this, which basically is the author kind of saying, yeah, a lot of the things in this are actually wrong and this won't happen in the real world, this is not actually how treatment happens, this is not how this happens. And it just felt like it was a cop-out to say I couldn't be bothered to actually do the research and make it realistic, so I put all these things in that wouldn't actually happen, which I was just like, okay, that seems a bit strange. But the other thing is with the actual way that this story was told, I found that, so you've got this main character and you know that something has happened with the roommate that she was living with at the summer camp, but you don't really know straight away exactly what happened. You don't know, you're not supposed to know she was involved, I believe. But the way that it's told in first person, and I feel like for this sort of story, you kind of need the main character to be completely set in their belief that, no, I was not responsible, no, I did not do this, so that as and when more things get revealed, it's a shock whether she did do it or didn't do it, whether she was right or wrong. Like, obviously you're going to doubt her going into it, because that's kind of the point, is you're figuring out whether she actually was involved. But I feel like she should be pretty set in her way that, no, I didn't do it, just to, like I said, just because otherwise, if she's got doubts, well, you're doubting all the way through then as well, and then it's not as much of a shock when it goes one way or the other. And from the very sort of first line of this one, she was kind of giving you hints of what it was that actually happened. So when it got to any sort of reveals, it just wasn't a big reveal. I just kind of didn't care. And then there were some reveals that were, I'd say, shocking in a way, but then also not. It was, and when the reveals happened, they sort of happened about halfway through. And then for the rest of it, it was just like, it seemed to drag a lot, when I was just like, okay, well, now that that's been sort of taken out of play, it just really dragged to get to the end of it. And yeah, I think I ended up skim reading a lot of this. I gave it 3 stars, but now I'm talking about it, I'm like, is it a 3? Is it a 2? I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, I won't read this again. It's a sort of book that once you've read it, you're not going to read it again anyway. But yeah, I'm glad that I have read it, I suppose, and it's off of my self-destruct TBR, but it's not one I'm necessarily going to recommend to people anytime soon. Okay, so the next book is another one that is, like, got a high rating. It got a 4-star, but it is also slightly disappointing because I really thought it was going to be a 5-star, and that is Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty. So this is the second book in the David Bad trilogy, which is about a character called Nare who has these sort of abilities that she's not really, doesn't really understand, but she's living in sort of the regular world. She's living in Cairo, and she is sort of using them to her advantage. She's working almost like a con woman type thing, until one day she accidentally ends up summoning a djinn and is taken back to sort of the djinn homeland, where she discovers a little bit more about why she has these powers and how she is sort of connected to that world. And it's a very interesting fantasy world. There was a lot of politics involved in it. The problem that I had with it is that I got lost a lot with the politics. Now, I like books that are heavy in those sort of things, but I just found that, I don't know if I left too long of a gap between the first one and the second one. It was only like 6 weeks, but it just felt like it took me a while to kind of figure out who everyone was again and where we were at. It didn't feel like there was a lot done to kind of help refresh your memory at all, which I suppose you don't have to do in a book, but it is helpful if they do just kind of, I don't know. The thing is at the back of the book there is this whole, like, let me show you how long this section actually is. At the back of the book there is a whole sort of chunk of pages that is all like cast of characters and a glossary and all of that sort of stuff that would have been very helpful if it was at the front of the book, or at least mentioned that it was in there, because I could have referred back to that. But it did just take me a while to really connect with this world again. It also didn't help that there was a time jump in this, so just kind of getting my bearings in that world was a bit, I don't know, a bit hard to do. By the time I got to the end, I really enjoyed it and feel like it's setting up really well for the final book in this trilogy. But I did say that at the end of the first one, I said I feel like that was a really good setup book, and then the second two could be great. And again, I am hoping that one of these is going to be a 5-star. The other thing that I will say about this is that there are kind of 3 main strands, or like 3 main characters essentially, and they inevitably end up all like separate at the end of the first book, and 2 of those kind of come together about halfway through this book, and that's where I started to get a bit more invested again. But then the other one is very much just on their own little route for a while, and it just felt like I was waiting for them all to sort of reunite for the story to really kick in. And we got to that point by the end of this, which is why I think the third one could be really, really good. But again, that is what I said at the end of the first one, and I don't know, I feel like I'm still waiting for it to hit the level that I want it to hit, and what I've sort of heard I've heard nothing but good things about this series, and I'm just waiting for it to get to that really, really like top tier. So yeah, I don't know if I actually said, but 4 stars. And then the last book that I read during this month, I actually read basically all on Sunday. I think into the early hours of Monday morning, but I needed to read this before spooky season finished, and that is The X Hex by Erin Sterling. So Erin Sterling is actually a pen name for the author Rachel Hawkins, who writes a wide variety of books. She writes thrillers that she's known for these days. I think it's thrillers anyway, but I know her from writing Her Royal Highness the Prince Charming book series, and I enjoyed those ones. They were sort of YA royalty based romances. This is her first adult romance, and it is about a character called Vivi, who is a witch. When she was 19, she had this bad breakup after a sort of 3-month whirlwind romance, and her cousin end up doing this sort of curse on him to kind of just help her get over the breakup, basically. They think it's a joke. They do it with a Bath and Body Works candle, and then it is 9 years later, and the guy in question is called Reese, ends up coming back to the town because his family actually founded the town, and he needs to come back to charge the ley lines. And basically when he gets there, they realise actually that curse may have worked, and a little bit worse than what they thought it would do. So I did really enjoy this one. I gave it 4 stars. There are a couple of things that I didn't love. Like, it was the actual breakup. The reason why they broke up was a little bit silly. And then they kind of never really spoke about it much when he came back. And then inevitably, I'm not spoiling it if I say that like it's a romance, they're going to end up reconciling at some point, but that just seemed to happen without any sort of conversation about what had actually happened previously. So some of the actual like setup parts of it was a bit like okay, but that being said, it was really fun. There was like the magical twist on it as well. It was just a fun sort of fluffy rom-com type book, and it was just what I needed to kind of finish the month off. It was nice that I managed to squeeze an extra book in there that wasn't just on my TBR. So yes, I'm glad I read it. It was 4-star. I will read more from this writer again in the future if she carries on sort of doing these types of books. I do believe that this is probably going to end up being a companion series, because when you go on Goodreads, number 1, it says the X Hex number 1, meaning that there's probably going to be more books. And also it's one of those where the main male character has got 2 brothers that are mentioned throughout it. One of them is actually like needed in the story, but the other one is just kind of mentioned a lot even though they never really appear, and that leads me to believe that those 2 are going to get their own books and their own storylines at some point, kind of like the Brown Sisters trilogy, because it's just when you have characters like that are always mentioned but they're not actually important in the story, it's like we're setting something up here, aren't we? But yeah, I'll be happy if it does carry on. I will definitely read more from this series. So this is my stack of books that I read in October. Like I said, not the worst reading month, not the best. I mean, I got some chunky books with Kingdom of Copper and Assassin's Quest in there. I also read some anticipated books, some books that have been on my TBR for a while. So, you know, overall, to say that I was sort of hampered in how much I could read for like a quarter of the month, it was good that I did manage to read this at least. And I'm very excited about where my reading's going to go in November, so I'm happy that I finished this month off strong because it sort of leads me right on to November in sort of good standing. Right, that is everything for today. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below. Let me know how your reading went in October. What's your favourite book that you read during the last month? Were you a lot spookier than I was? Obviously my reading shows spooky season is just not for me. Right, I will see you guys soon with a new video. Bye.